Pepe the Frog in Hong Kong? The Chosen One appears. And social media actually stands up to China. That and more on this week's China Uncensored. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This week's China News headlines. Hong Kong has been in the midst of 2 months of non-stop protests. 1.7 million people took to the streets last Sunday. They've been protesting an extradition bill that would allow Hong Kong authorities to send people to mainland China for trial. The people of Hong Kong say they're fighting for their freedom. China calls it a color revolution backed by the U.S. The truth? Hong Kong protesters are a bunch of white supremacists. Yes, that's Pepe the Frog. As the New York Times says, Pepe the Frog is a hate symbol, a cheerleader of racism and anti-Semitism, a friend of alt-right extremists. Yes, clearly that describes the Hong Kong protesters that have adopted him. Some are even spray painting him around the city. There's even a Hong Kong Pepe-themed sticker pack for WhatsApp. So, are the Hong Kong protesters a bunch of Nazi white supremacists? No. It turns out that Pepe symbolizes something else to Hong Kongers. One protester said, "It just looks funny and captures the hearts of so many youngsters. It is a symbol of youth participation in the movement." Or my personal favorite, the protester who said, "To me, Pepe is just a Hello Kitty-like character." Hello, Pepe. Yes, that image will haunt your dreams. Just like Pepe the Pooh. You're welcome. But in some ways, perhaps Hong Kongers have the purest understanding of Pepe. Pepe was created more than a decade ago, long before he was adopted by the alt-right on 4chan. And as Pepe's creator says, in the end, Pepe is whatever you say he is. And I, the creator, say that Pepe is love. Pepe is love. An employee of the British consulate in Hong Kong has been detained in mainland China. Simon Chung traveled to Shenzhen on business for the consulate, where he was picked up for, well, at first no one knew because the police refused to say why Chung was in detention. But then my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, said that they detained Chung for soliciting a prostitute in Shenzhen. To which everyone said, sure, yeah. Especially concerning was the fact that Chung was apparently detained after he already left Shenzhen and was on his way back to Hong Kong on the high-speed rail. That means he was most likely detained by Chinese police while he was already in Hong Kong at the West Kowloon rail station. Last year, Hong Kong and mainland Chinese authorities struck a deal to put part of the train station under Chinese law instead of Hong Kong law. At the time, people were worried about Chinese law being implemented on Hong Kong soil, but as this case clearly shows, they had nothing to worry about. Everything's fine. In fact, Chung's mysterious detention will probably make Hong Kongers even more enthusiastic and reassured about the extradition bill to China. Everything's fine. And since Simon Chung was an employee of the UK consulate, obviously the UK is up in arms. And by that I mean they profusely apologized to the Chinese government for the inconvenience before retiring for afternoon tea. Meanwhile, U.S. Vice President Mike Pence says Beijing needs to honor the treaty they made with the UK regarding Hong Kong, or else people might think China won't honor any deal. Well, someone who worked on that deal for China had this to say on the UK's Channel 4 News.
Let me get this clear then. The joint declaration is dead, correct?
No, the joint declaration terminated when the British government handed over the sovereignty back to China midnight June the 30th, 1997.
Which shows you just how difficult a lasting trade deal with China will be. Only a very special person would be able to do it. Well, here's U.S. President Donald Trump talking to reporters about the trade war and standing up to the Chinese regime.
Somebody had to do it. I am the chosen one.
Surprised? Well, actually, this was prophesied back in 2014.
You are the most talented, most interesting, and most extraordinary person in the universe. And you are capable of amazing things because you are the special.
Yes, I'm saying that Donald Trump is President Business. Think about it.
Oh, we got a hugger.
Maybe. In China's often forgotten special administrative region, Macau, things aren't going so well. It's time to vote for a new leader. But don't worry, you won't have to sit through endless campaigning that drags on for 2 years, because in Macau, there's only one candidate, Ho Lat-sung. He's the only person the Communist Party approved to run. He's a Beijing-backed former legislator who is expected to cement China's control over the special administrative region and distance it from escalating protests in neighboring Hong Kong. Democracy in Macau is so much more harmonious than in Hong Kong. But some people are still standing up to the Chinese Communist Party, like the mayor of Prague. He's been fighting against Beijing's influence in the city. He reinstituted the practice of flying the Tibetan flag from City Hall. He allowed an exhibition on city property commemorating the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests. He hosted the leader of Tibet's exiled government and made an official visit to the Taiwanese capital, Taipei. And he has called for Prague to renegotiate its 2016 sister city agreement with Beijing, removing the acknowledgement of the One China principle, which states that China, Taiwan, and Tibet are a single country that should be ruled from Beijing. FYI, he's a member of the Czech Pirate Party. And speaking of standing up to the Communist Party, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Twitter and Facebook have done so as well. Both social media giants said they discovered fake accounts spreading disinformation about Hong Kong. Those accounts have been deleted. YouTube also disabled a bunch of channels for spreading fake news about Hong Kong. Twitter also said it would block state-controlled media outlets from advertising on its site. If only the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal could hold themselves to the same journalistic standards as Twitter. But no, they're very happy to have Chinese state-run media advertise in their publications. The Chinese regime was quick to condemn Facebook's and Twitter's actions, saying that overseas Chinese have the right to express their opinions. And the irony caused the internet to explode. 15 papers from Chinese scientists have been retracted because they may have involved involuntary organ donation, that is, killing innocent people and harvesting their organs. The Chinese Communist Party was quick to defend the papers, saying it's fine to murder Chinese people as long as it's for science, or politics, or any other reason. And then remember they had meant to cover up the whole thing. Whoops. What China should defend is the rail lines of the Belt and Road Initiative. That's Chinese leader Xi Jinping's trillion-dollar infrastructure plan to bring the world a little closer to China. A big part of that was a massive rail line connecting China and Europe. Well, China's state-run railway has now admitted that most of the train cars have been empty. In one extreme case, only one of 41 containers on a particular train actually carried goods. Widespread waste and fraud in a state-owned enterprise of a communist nation? I'm shocked. Shocked. And finally, in China, love is not always love.
China ruled out legalizing same-sex marriage on Wednesday. A parliament spokesman said China's legal position on marriage will remain between a man and a woman.
That's so incredibly hypocritical. The Communist Party once allowed a human woman to marry a toad. And remember, Pepe is a frog, not a toad, so Pepe still gets to be loved. And that's it for this week's China News Headlines. And now it's time for me to answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored with $1 or more by contributing to the crowdfunding website Patreon. Daniel Ortman asks, could the trade war break the CCP? If so, why didn't we do it before? Well, obviously, we didn't have the chosen one before. Or, as President Business would put it,
I do blame past administrations for allowing this out-of-control trade deficit to take place and to grow.
But it's not just past administrations, because those presidents felt pressure from the big U.S. companies that funded their political campaigns. The China market seemed big and full of gold, and a lot of people and businesses thought they could get a piece of it. And so for many years, the U.S. leadership turned a blind eye to all the Chinese intellectual property theft, WTO violations, and currency manipulation. In fact, companies would sometimes complain to the U.S. officials about China, but then ask them not to say anything because they still wanted to do business there. It eventually got so bad, though, it couldn't be ignored. But even today, companies like Google and Microsoft partner with Chinese military universities on research that may be used in persecuting Chinese citizens? Thanks for your question, Daniel. And if you have a question for me you want to hear answered on the show, sign up to join the China Uncensored 50 Cent Army by supporting the show with $1 or more per episode. Again, YouTube is demonetizing us so much we would have to shut down the show if it weren't for your support. And to everyone else, thanks for watching. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.